I have tips, exercises, and a really clear-cut process if you want to learn how to draw and paint people digitally. I'm still really bad at saying that word digitally, it's so hard, but anyway, last time I made a tutorial about digital figure drawing. I was really struggling with the drawing part of it, right? I found that basically what I like to do when I'm drawing figures is move my arm in this kind of big open way to make these gestural marks. And for that, I love pencil and paper, and also love the feel of the pencil, that sort of tactile feel of the pencil on the newsprint paper. And I really enjoy that. There are some really big advantages to digital drawing and painting though, which we can get into. And so I've kept persevering. And now I think I have a setup which allows me to get those gestural marks just like when I'm drawing on paper. I've also started to teach people about how to draw people on a computer or on your iPad or whatever, and realized that this exercise that I'm going to show you is really valuable and probably the best way to get into all of this. So I'm going to share some tips, these exercises. I'm also going to talk about this setup and this tablet that I have now, so you can get into digital figure drawing and painting yourself as well. So first let's talk about the setup, because the setup's really important. I need to be able to move my arm from my shoulder to get the kind of drawings that I want to get. Now with this setup, I'm able to do that. So you can see that my arm is moving from my shoulder rather than moving the pencil from my fingers. Before, I was trying to draw figures on the iPad, and the best way that I found to do that was to sort of, maybe hold the pencil a bit further down and then use my fingers to try and make bigger sweeping marks. I never found that to be quite as good though as drawing on paper, where I could move my arm in this really nice way. So having a larger tablet has been really good because I've got more space to move my arm around on it with, and having this, it looks so silly, this glove. I'm one of these people now that wears this thing. It allows my hand to kind of slide around, and that's what I need to get these marks that I want to make. So if I want to start to, sketch a figure like this, and I want to get this kind of smooth, mark making, these nice S-shaped curves, straight lines with a bit of taper to them and all of this kind of stuff, because of the pen, the pressure sensitivity and all that of the tablet, combined with the fact that my arm can move around in this ergonomic way, that allows me to make those marks. And so I feel like I'm able to create the kind of lines that I've always wanted to, I like to make on paper, but then get the advantages of drawing digitally. So with an iPad, you can set the iPad into this thing called a sketchboard. I have never tried it, but it's at least going to allow your hand to move around. It's going to create like a surface kind of like this. The actual drawing surface is still going to be small because it's still going to be the iPad, area only. But at the very least, you can move your arm around. It's not going to slip off the edge of the iPad. And so I think that could be an option if you want to do this with the iPad. But I've just gone for this, which is a bigger tablet. I can't use Procreate here because it's on my computer and Procreate's an iPad app. But I've gone with Clip Studio Paint, which is not super expensive and seems really good. And I'm using the built-in it's called a G Pen brush that they have. And I really like using it. It's got a really nice sort of taper to it. And I quite enjoy it because rather than, it kind of makes it a different style of drawing versus what I do on paper. And that's kind of fun. It also is really conducive to value studies as well as gestural drawings, which we'll look at in a minute. So the tablet I'm using is a Huion tablet. And again, like Clip Studio Paint is an alternative to Photoshop, which is really expensive. And I think not an ideal choice for a lot of people like me, because I tried it and it kept pushing me to use its AI tools, and they've got weird policies and stuff. So Clip Studio Paint to me seems more artist friendly, and it seems really powerful as well. So that's great. Then for the tablet, I have a Huion here. So Huion is a less expensive alternative to Wacom, and the quality is really good. Full disclosure though, I haven't tried a Wacom Cintiq, which would be the equivalent of this, about twice the price. Maybe it's better. From most of the reviews I see though, it isn't that much better, but this one is much more affordable and really good. I think it's fantastic, right? When I got this though, this is the Huion Kamvas 4K Pro, I think that's the full name. You know, there's all kinds of specs and stuff like that, which I could talk about. I really don't care about that. I care about, is the screen good enough for me to see my drawings and paintings clearly? Is it really accurate? Like when I put a mark here, it feels like it's going in the right place. And it does those things. I had to calibrate it so that it would be in the right place, which only takes about 30 seconds. So definitely take that time to calibrate it. I also had to fiddle with some settings on my computer so that the colors and stuff looked right on here. It took about 5 minutes or so of trying stuff before I got it to be just right. And then it's been really good since then. I did get it. By the way, I got it for free. I have to say, I got it for free. I have only had 2 books. Like, I get offered a lot of stuff for free, and I always just say no because I don't want it, except for 2 books, art books, and then this. So this, I reached out to them and asked for it because I really, really wanted it. But they haven't paid me to say it's good or anything like that. This model right now, it's probably somewhere about £1,000 or a little bit less than that. So it's pretty expensive actually. You can get, this is a display tablet, a pretty big one. I think you could definitely do, you know, the stuff that you want to do with a smaller version of this. Not too small though, because like we said, the real estate is a nice part of it, but I do find that I don't kind of use all of this space. It's really nice to have, but I don't need so much. So if you can afford it, it's great, but you can also go with one of the smaller versions. Another big thing that could help you save though is instead of getting the display tablet, which has the screen built into it, so when you're making a mark, it feels like you're drawing right onto the tablet, and you can see the marks right here. You can get a pen display, so it's got no screen, but you move your pen here, and then the screen is your computer screen. So at first, it feels like there's a disconnect between your hand and what you're seeing, but there are big advantages to pen displays too. One is the posture. You're looking here while drawing down here instead of looking down here. Another is that your hand isn't in the way of what you're looking at. So I like having this display tablet, but a lot of professionals use the pen display, and it's, you know, a lot less expensive. Okay, so I'm in Clip Studio. I'm using their built-in G Pen, and I want to draw this pose, say. If you watched our videos, you know that I'm going to suggest that you kind of look at the overall what's happening in the pose and build it in terms of this kind of egg-shaped rib cage in here, and then a sort of pants shape. I mean, right now he's wearing pants, so that's good, and that kind of helps me a lot. But trying to figure out what's happening, and what I think is happening is that at this sort of upper torso, the rib cage level, it's quite upright, it's quite vertical, but then the hips are coming off at this kind of diagonal, like that, like this, and this is making a squash here and a stretch along here. And so by emphasizing that here in this kind of simplified sketch, I am already capturing some of the gesture here, just with the simple forms, right? This is the shoulder blade. It's getting pulled across the, shoulders getting pulled forward. So I can start to pull that across the rib cage. And we have a video about shoulders too, if you want to check that out. Then I've got the arm coming up here. I've got this leg coming down here. It kind of makes a big S-shaped curve down the leg. There's his butt, and then there's his other leg, and I'm just making sure to check where is this other leg coming out from relative to this pants shape, and it's coming out from up here near the top of that pants shape like that. So I start to build up this pose in terms of these really simple ideas, And I'm thinking about what is happening, where, there's a squashing side and a stretching side in the torso because of the changing angle from the rib cage to the hips. I'm thinking about big sort of through lines. So this leg, it kind of makes an S-shaped curve here, so I can capture that. I'm not trying to force big lines that aren't there. I'm not going to kind of go, that's not really there. But if it's really there and it really captures what's happening in a big single flowing line, I can put that in. All right, what I can do, because it's digital, I've started to lay down the basics of this pose. One thing I could do is pull down the opacity here, and I can have another go at this now, right? So I can take another look. I'm just realizing that I should move the reference to the other side because I'm left-handed. But anyway, so I think I've probably stretched the torso out a bit. So I'm going to shift the hips up on this second layer. And this is one of the advantages of digital, is that I can use layers and I can refine my sketch on top of my first attempt. And sometimes I find that my first attempt is really bad, but it's okay because I can just do a new layer, and that really bad first go that I put down, I can just fix everything on the second go. I put down a really bad sketch and it's all over, it's all off, but I can see how it's off. Oh, the hips need to move over here, the torso's too long, and then I start to adjust my second go by not making all the mistakes I made in the first go. Now this is something you can do on paper as well, but if you keep doing these layers enough, it starts to make a mess on the paper. Whereas with the digital, I can, just get rid of the layers that I don't want anymore. If I wanted a more charcoal pencil feel, instead of this kind of ink feel, I could use a charcoal pencil brush. Maybe this one is from Lane Brown from his Photoshop pack. I imported it to Clip Studio. You can get really good ones for Procreate as well. So this setup with the Huion and something like Clip Studio works really well for gestural drawing, or if you have an iPad and Procreate, maybe consider something like that sketchboard. Maybe you can DIY a version of that. Trying to get this kind of ergonomic setup where you can move your arm really nicely. What about value studies then? So value studies are the next stage of this really, really important exercise. So I really like doing value studies digitally, my favorite word there, because I can use the lasso fill tool. So I can basically just draw a shape like this and it's going to fill it. Or I can just use the lasso tool. If it's Procreate, I would select the area and then just fill it with the value that I want. And so I have this underlying sketch here. So I lower the opacity of it, and on another layer above that, I can start to do a simple shape, trying to figure out the shapes of dark, the shapes of shadow. And it's going to be a little bit rough at first, this shape, but I can always refine it and cut back into it. It's like an initial shape that I'm going to then sort of sculpt with. So just trying to get the overall, which way is facing towards the light, which way is facing away from the light. I'm not trying to get any, detailed or nuanced information into these shapes really. If I do, that's when sometimes I get tempted to start adding some nuance and details and stuff, and that's when things start to go wrong. So I just start to make this shape, and what I then do is grab my pen again, and I can add to this shape, right? I can just kind of start to refine this shape, or I get the eraser, I just get the hard eraser, and I can cut back into this shape like this. So I can work on refining this shape based on what I'm looking at. So I've done this very, very quickly. I would spend normally maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You could spend hours and it would be time probably well spent refining and improving this shape of light, of dark against the light. the way that I'm improving it is not by adding tons of details. It's just trying to make these simple ideas reflect what's actually happening in the pose better and better. Now, I have exaggerated this pose a little bit, and I feel like it's more gestural that way, but maybe his butt's sticking out a little bit too far there. So anyway, I can just keep going with this, improving and sort of refining this value version of this sketch. I'll put up some recordings of value studies that I've done with this exercise. When you're trying to learn how to draw and paint digitally, then this exercise, I think, where you simplify the forms of the figure with a simple line drawing, trying to make it interesting and gestural, capturing what's there, you can make sure the proportions are there, etc. Then switch to the values. So bring down the opacity, then switch to a light and dark, separation, putting everything that's getting hit by light into the light area and everything that's not getting hit by light into the darks. Keep refining that shape and improving that shape, kind of carving into it with your eraser. Keep the edges hard. No, you don't need to start smushing about with the edges and doing fine shading and stuff. Just keep the edges hard and cut into it with a hard eraser and add to it with a hard, like a pen. And this is gonna really, really build your skill at putting all your values into simplified buckets, the light and the dark, all the nuance gets removed and you're making decisions about what's in light, what's in dark. And then refining that shape, making sure that the shadows wrap over the forms really well, things like that. Keeping the shapes simple, making sure the shapes are still nicely designed, not too complicated or convoluted. This is, to me, a fantastic way to practice your digital skills. Also, if you're doing something like watercolor, a great exercise to do in watercolor or something like that too. Then, once your shapes are looking good, you could start to, soften certain edges and things if you want. Then move on to the next pose and repeat. And this is such a good sort of fundamental exercise. You could do that for, you could just do one of those a day, one pose a day. It would be so powerful for you. Then I use those skills and ideas to do the paintings like these ones. So obviously there's a few, like design choices and trying to have fun with it. And there's some color ideas. But the fundamental sort of building blocks of these paintings is in this exercise, which is why I think it's so powerful and effective. All right, now I want to talk about a little bit more about the ergonomics, about the setup here, because Huion very kindly sent this to me, right? But they also sent this arm over here. And I tried to put, this is the, I'll put the product on the screen, but this is what it came with. This is a monitor arm. This is not a good arm, I don't think, for putting a drawing tablet on because it holds it too high. I want my drawing tablet to be down here. I don't want to be drawing up here. It's also why I don't like to have my paper, pad like up here. My arm gets tired, all right? So, it's, my poor arm. So I want my arm to hang down like this and just little movements of my shoulder kind of relaxed, not much, muscle strain at all. And that way I can just draw for hours and hours and hours and not get tired. So this thing holds it up too high. So what I did was I've now got, this is like the most expensive, I mean, I got it for free, I guess, but the craziest desk easel ever. I've got my newsprint on here now, and I kind of screwed up just a block of wood to hold the newsprint on, and now, you don't need to do that though. Just use a desk easel, but I like it because I can then just kind of push it away over there. All right, so what I've got instead is I think it's called an Ergotron arm, and I'll put the one that I got. It's a bit pricey, but it means that I can just kind of pull it in, no problem when I want it, and when I don't want it, it's up here as a second monitor. The little legs, this thing comes with little legs on it. So if you don't have anything to put it on, you can just put it on your table and then put the legs out and it will raise it up. And the angle isn't too bad actually. It's a bit too like down for me. So I want it to have to be a little bit more angled up so I can sit back in my chair kind of thing. But it's not bad. So you don't actually need this thing. But then if you don't have it, it doesn't quite function as a second monitor when you're not drawing on it. So I do think this thing is quite worth it and it feels really strong, like it's not going to drop the thing. All right. So the other thing I want to mention is that the little glove thing that they provide, and I think you can get other ones as well, is really, really worth wearing when you're doing your drawings. Maybe not as important when you're doing your painting. So in a future video, I'll talk about the painting process and this kind of like going longer, maybe 4 to 8 hours or something, getting into color, thinking about design and trying to make a sort of more finished image like these ones that I like to sometimes do. But the sort of, the core of the practice, right? The push-ups that you do every day to build your muscles is this kind of exercise, I think. Simplify the forms, get that gesture, then simplify the values and get that 2-value breakdown. If you can just do that over and over, everything else is a lot easier to do. And I do think that this setup is really good for that. The Huion canvas has allowed me to draw in this really nice, natural way with big arm movements rather than trying to hunch over the iPad, just moving about my fingers. And this is really kind of drills home to me how important your setup is if you're drawing with paper. Try and get it so that you can move your arm in this way. If you're drawing with digital, if it's an iPad, maybe consider one of those sketchboards. Haven't tried it, but it might help. So the setup is super duper important. Now, a final note is that the software has a million functions and features, and I don't know how to use 99% of them. And it would be really easy to get dragged into them, and just start trying to learn all the stuff and etc. It's so important, I think, when there's so many options to really narrow it down. So you give yourself a couple of brushes that you like to use, one for sketching and drawing and one for, creating shapes of value, one for painting, and then do simple exercises like this. Get really comfortable with just simple drawing and simple value studies. And then you can start to, pull in maybe some other brush ideas or other features and things like that. Learn other stuff slowly, like bite-sized chunks. Always setting yourself up to not be overwhelmed, I think is really, really useful. All right. So thanks again to Huion for sending me this thing. Really, really enjoy it. There's going to be another video up on the screen about how I drew figures, tips for drawing figures on the iPads, which might be useful. And I'll see you over there.